What's going on, everybody? So before I go ahead and swap off of the Necro here, I just want to give you my thoughts on what builds I've been running in PvE, PvP, as well as go through attributes, legendary gems, and set items for each of the builds and what ones to look out for the Necro. These are all my thoughts. Let's get into it. Alright, so the reason I decided to make this guide a little bit earlier is because we are approaching Hell 5, and as you can see, I actually have a blue bar on the top left of my screen, and this is one of the first times I've ever had this, and the main reason for it is because I'm having a struggle on getting groups for Hell 5, that is a huge deal because it's never really happened before because a lot of people have ended up, kind of fallen off, and so we're going to swap to Barbarian early so that we can actually gear up for Hell 5 instead of, wasting and refarming all the sets, because I will lose every single set because I'm going to a strength class. All that being said, we're going to talk about the attributes, legendary gems, legendary items for builds and things like that in this video. First off, let's talk about the attributes. So intelligence is going to be your main attribute for the Necro. It's going to give you your increased damage, which is super impactful, generally speaking. After that, I would recommend you focus on fortitude, simply for the fact that you get extra armor pen, and extra armor pen is going to massively increase your damage in group content for PvE, specifically for dungeons, and specifically when you're running with a satyr. That's super impactful because dungeons are going to be one of the longest parts of the content that you can speed up if you happen to have good stats. After that, you're going to want to go for willpower. Willpower actually can be on par with fortitude oftentimes because Necro actually has a lot of dot effects, and potency will extend those. On top of this, will extend some of your CC moves. So willpower actually could be argued that it's the second most important stat, and I could agree with you. Willpower is incredibly good on the Necro. However, I still favor armor pen, generally speaking, for the summon build, and that's what I generally run in dungeon. Next up, we have vitality and strength. Vitality is always going to be good on every build, but I would say it's a little bit secondary to potency and armor pen, and then strength, of course, is literally useless on the Necro, so don't even bother. Following that, we're going to talk about legendary gems. Now, this is a category that I unfortunately don't have a crazy amount of experience because I can't just willy-nilly swap my 5-star legendary gems because they are currently rank 5 and rank 6s, which is very difficult for me to go ahead and reacquire. Now, that being said, there's a few things that I think you should look out for, and I'll mention a couple of the 5-star legendary gems here. First off, Blood-Soaked Jade is good on every single class. I highly recommend you go for some of the Blood-Soaked Jades for your extra movement speed and damage. Followed by that, Bottled Hope is incredibly good for bone armor, spreading your movement speed and your damage across the board. Super impactful. Following that, your Chip of the Stone Flesh actually can be some super solid damage, although I do think that this is incredibly weak in PvE content. In PvP, this can be potentially super solid for the Necro. Following that, some single and 2-star gems here that I would recommend. Something like Follower's Burden here could be potentially super solid for a summon build when you're running in PvE content. Following that, potentially running something like Cutthroat's Grin. I believe this works with how your summons interact. If your summons are behind the enemy, or you're in front of the enemy and the summons are behind, it actually works with them from what I've seen, and from what some other people have mentioned to me. After that, Berserker's Eyes, always good, of course, and then Freedom of Demotion. That's super solid for some of your increasing your durations of your skeletal mages and some of your golems for some summon builds. Those are some of the legendary gems I recommend. Obviously, there's a lot more legendary gems that are, not necessarily super top tier or specific to the Necro that are good, but those are the ones that are kind of stand out to me. Echoing Shade can be good. Seeping Bile's always good. Howler's Call, even some other ones here. So those are the legendary gems that I would look out for. After that, we're going to dive into some farming builds for open world farming. All right, so starting off with our first build here for open world farming, this is going to be your general grinding build. For this one, I, generally speaking, will run these 4 skills. I'm going to be running Wraith Form, Command Golem, Bone Armor, Bone Spikes, and then Soulfire. Following that, my legendary items here are going to be Hideous Dawning for the dot effect on your Bone Spikes. This also makes it so it's very easy to cast, and having 3 charges, it allows you to keep kill streaks up a little bit better. This one's going to be Flickering Warmth here on the chest piece. For Bone Armor is going to give you Bone Spikes at orbit. Your shoulders are unfortunately not really particularly useful. I do believe there is a shoulder piece that can be used, but I unfortunately am missing quite a few shoulder pieces. Bone Spikes range can be used, and that one is really the only one that I'd recommend using if you happen to have it. After that, I highly recommend you go for a Graven Bulwark. This is going to increase your Flickering Warmth duration. Desolataria, Tor Victoria is going to give your command golem the burning effect, which is really, really nice for farming. And then Baleful Trinity here is going to be the offhand that I've run. Unfortunately, again, this is another one that I do not have, and I have not been able to test. However, I'm not sure if Dominus from Dust actually works with your command golem when it dies and it actually burns away. This is something that I highly recommend if it actually does, or Beacon of the Lead. There's a few options here. I use Baleful Trinity because this basically allows me to go ahead and pick off a couple of things. For set items, I would highly recommend you run a 2-piece Isatar set. And this allows you to move quickly through open world farming. Or you could run a 6-piece Gray set for the instant burst damage. Oftentimes it's going to be a really, really solid option for you to just nuke a pack down every 40 seconds. But if you're trying to move around in a circle, for example, in Realm of Damnation, a 2-piece Isatar followed by a 4-piece Grace set, or perhaps a 2-piece Isatar, 2-piece Grace set, and then a 2-piece Vithus set, or even a 2-piece Isatar and 4-piece Vithus set could be potentially good for that attack speed increase. All of those are solid options for you to be able to run. Next up, we have the dungeon build that I was running. Now, this one I really enjoyed, but I'm still missing a few pieces that could potentially swap things up. Now, for skills here, we are running Command Skeletons, Command Golem, Skeletal Mage, and Dark Curse, followed by Soulfire. This is a full summon build. After those skills, we are going to be running Skull Veil for the increased duration of Skeletal Mage. The chest piece is going to activate Wraith Form. This one's pretty much useless, unfortunately, because we do not happen to have really any chest piece that does anything for us. We have like bone armor and things like that, so nothing super great there. Then we are going to be running the shoulder piece that's going to give us extra Dark Curse duration. You could run the extra copy of Skeletal Mage, but I prefer this one by far. Guided by Maggots, this is going to make our Dark Curse actually make our minions go into a frenzy. It's going to increase attack and movement speeds. Desolataria is going to give our command golem a burning golem. You could run Accounting for Weakness for a big like flesh golem that could do some massive damage in some dungeon runs. And then a Beacon of the Lead here is going to be our offhand. For offhand, you could run a couple of other things from what I remember. Something like the Prong could be really solid if you're struggling to survive. Life and Balance could be good. Overall, super solid there. You could also potentially run Welcome End for super high burst skeletal mage damage, but it's going to have a longer cooldown, so something like that could potentially work. But the way this build, generally speaking, will work is you're going to just slap on your summons, drop them all down, hit the boss, and then slap them, and then drop your Dark Curse on top of every single person here. Now, the set item you're definitely going to be wanting to run is going to be, let me see if I have an item here. I'm running a pure combat rating right now, but 6-piece Shepherd set. Now, this set is going to absolutely demolish things when you increase their attack speed by 60% for those boss fights if something critical hits. With the extra attack speed from Dark Curse, this 6-piece Shepherd set is going to be absolutely insane, and it's going to do some massive damage. Keep in mind that 6-piece Grace set, or rather 4-piece Grace set, does not work with your summons. Unfortunately, I have tested this quite a bit, so you cannot get that extra damage. Otherwise, 4-piece Grace set would be extremely viable. I highly recommend you run with a 6-piece Shepherd set. And next up, we have PvP. So for PvP, you're going to be running a very standard Necro support CC build. This is what I highly recommend you all run. Something like Wraith Form here, then Bone Wall, Bone Armor, Bone Spikes, and Bone Spear. Following that, our legendary items are going to be No Mouth Face to give our Bone Spikes a little bit of a knockup and lacking the charging. We have Exhumant's Backbone, making Bone Wall a Bone Pillar. Grave Dirt Shoulders here, that's going to make our Bone Armor immune to any knocking out of position abilities. Proximal Fear is going to give our Wraith Form the Fear effect. Blight Maul to poison with our Bone Spear, and our offhand really is useless. Now, generally, the way this build works is you're going to want to group up, give Bone Armor to everyone in your squad, and then following up by just playing a ranged support style. Dropping your Bone Walls or your Bone Pillars here, following that up with a Bone Spike, and then following that up with a Fear potentially. You can really do some heavy CC chain combos by going Bone Pillar, Bone Spikes, Fear into Bone Pillar, Bone Spikes, and then that's like a 4 to 5 second CC duration, following up with everyone hitting them. It's just absolutely absurd. Now, there are a few other builds out there, and I have experimented with a bunch of them. However, unlike the Wizard, I don't feel like there's a lot of reason to run some of these other builds. I know some people out there will disagree, and that's perfectly fine. I think that, generally speaking, your Necro support PvP build is just going to be absolutely the best build to run, like 99% of the time. Unlike the Wizard, where you find yourself in situations where you can run that teleport explosion build to get heavy burst damage in there, it's going to be outclassing the ranged build when you just want to go ahead and push super hard. You can run a damage dot build with the Necro here in PvP. I don't think it's that good compared to this. I think this is so far and above the best Necro build that I think you should absolutely run this. Along with that, I think that you should absolutely be running the summoning build. There are some different variations of it, and I kind of like went over some other legendary items you could go for, but I highly recommend you run a summon build in PvE and dungeons and things like that, because it's going to give you the highest amount of damage per second. Whereas if you run something like with Bone Spirits or something like that, you're going to get so much less damage out of your build. Then I highly recommend you don't run that. Again, unlike the Wizard, where you saw there was comparable damage between, for example, the Lightning Nova with high speed, combining that with potentially a super pure damage build with the Firestorm. Both of them have comparable damage, but one of them has higher speed. So unlike that, I think that generally speaking, you're going to want pure damage on Necro, because you can't really compete with the movement speed that other classes have with just race form. It doesn't even come close to teleport plus Lightning Nova or Horse. So that's what I've seen and what I've been using. Overall, my overall thoughts on Necro are the PvE damage is just absolutely absurd with the summons. And as soon as you get that build together with the Dark Curse and Shepherd set, you're going to find yourself doing some massive damage. PvP is actually incredibly fun. I'm getting a little bit bored of it because it's the same playstyle. You don't do a crazy amount of damage. It's generally speaking just CC and support. That is a really solid playstyle, and it does a lot of work, but it is not a fun and engaging playstyle from what I've found. I've played several Battlegrounds matches here, and more often than not, I've been doing a ton of vault runs, so very close quarters and small teams. So that is super impactful. And overall, Necro has become my really liked class overall, honestly. The only problem I have with it is that it is very slow and it does not move a lot. Again, I think a lot of people took that last video that I put about saying Necro sucks. That was about my opinion on the class rather than something that I think the class itself is. I was not enjoying the Necro, and I will say I have enjoyed doing a lot of damage and being extremely impactful in PvP, but I'm still not enjoying the playstyle. And that is something that I will note to a lot of you. If you do not enjoy watching your summons, doing a lot of the work, or you do not enjoy, kind of guiding away and playing from range and doing all that type of stuff, you're probably not going to like the Necro compared to the Wizard, which has a different playstyle, or has potentially a bunch of different playstyles, or just really insane damage, and you're doing it yourself. This is something that you're not going to enjoy. Overall, the Necro, I think, is a little bit worse than the Wizard in PvP, and is one of, if not the strongest PvE dungeon damage dealer for burst damage for boss fights. It's absolutely insane. So hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about the Necro yourself. Let me know if there's any other builds that you highly would recommend in the comment section down below. Again, these are the ones that I've found and tested to be the strongest in terms of the situations that I've run. Again, bursting damage, boss damages, and then also burst damage for farming and speeding up along, and then of course just outright supporting in PvP. These are the ones that I've found to be the best. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you for the next video.